U.S. warship destroyed in the Red Sea. Who attacked and why it matters. One powerful. U.S. warship, moving through one of the most important sea routes on Earth, suddenly becomes the center of a shocking incident. Calm water turns into chaos as missiles appear over the horizon. Alarms begin echoing across the deck, and within seconds, a massive explosion shakes the silence of the Red Sea. Across military command centers and global shipping networks, the same question begins to spread. Who attacked the ship? And more importantly, why did it happen in one of the most sensitive trade corridors in the world? Because this stretch of water is not just another ocean route. Nearly 15% of global trade moves through this narrow gateway every year, carrying oil cargo containers, energy supplies, and industrial goods between Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. When a billion-dollar warship is struck in such a location, it sends a message far beyond the battlefield. A signal that investors, shipping companies, and governments immediately begin to analyze. But the deeper concern is not only about the ship. The deeper concern is what this attack may trigger across global trade routes and international security. Before the story unfolds, welcome to News Horizon, where global events are examined through the lens of power trade and economic stability. If someone who has seen many decades of change were sitting beside you right now, they would probably say that understanding the world has never been more important. So consider subscribing and becoming part of this conversation. And before the analysis begins, tell us where you're watching from, because every country connected to global trade is part of this story. The event began in one of the most critical waterways on the planet. The Red Sea may look calm on a map yet. For the global economy, it functions as a narrow artery through which enormous volumes of trade travel every day. Oil tankers, container ships, and commercial cargo vessels move through this corridor, connecting the economies of Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Naval forces operate in these waters not by accident, but by design. Their presence helps protect commercial shipping and maintain stability in a route that carries billions of dollars worth of goods across the ocean. But on that day, the reports began to circulate, describing an unexpected attack. Missiles and explosive drones were observed approaching the vessel, forcing the crew to activate defensive systems under extreme pressure. Then, a violent blast was seen on the water, followed by fire and heavy damage on board. Within hours, analysts, military observers, and shipping companies began asking the same question. How could such an attack occur in one of the most protected maritime corridors in the world? And what could it mean for the security of global trade routes moving forward? The Red Sea sits between continents, but its importance reaches far beyond geography. For global trade, it functions as one of the most critical maritime highways connecting the economies of Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Every day, enormous cargo ships move through this corridor carrying energy industrial goods, food supplies, and manufactured products that sustain modern economies. The route begins in the narrow el-Mandeb Strait near Yemen and continues north toward the Suez Canal, which provides the fastest maritime connection between Europe and Asia. Without this corridor, ships traveling between the two regions would be forced to sail thousands of additional miles around the southern tip of Africa. That longer journey would increase shipping costs, delay cargo deliveries, and create significant pressure on global supply chains. Because of this geography, the Red Sea has become one of the most closely monitored waterways in the world. Energy markets pay particular attention to this region because large volumes of oil and refined petroleum products move through these waters every year. For global businesses, the corridor represents something even more valuable than oil. It represents time efficiency and predictable delivery schedules. Modern supply chains depend on precise timing, where cargo leaving factories in Asia arrives at ports in Europe within tightly planned windows. When this flow remains uninterrupted, global commerce operates smoothly. But when uncertainty appears in a maritime corridor like the Red Sea, the ripple effects can spread quickly through international markets. Shipping companies begin reviewing risk levels. Insurance providers reconsider maritime security premiums. Commodity traders begin watching freight costs and delivery timelines. Even a small disruption in a choke point can force companies to reconsider entire shipping routes. This is why naval forces from several countries maintain a visible presence in the region. Their mission is not only military, it is economic protection. They help ensure that commercial vessels traveling through this narrow corridor remain safe from attacks, piracy, or political instability. The destruction of a military vessel in such a sensitive location, therefore, sends a signal that extends far beyond the battlefield. It introduces uncertainty into one of the most carefully protected trade routes in the world. For governments, it raises questions about security. For shipping companies, it raises concerns about risk. And for the global economy, it raises a deeper issue. How stable are the corridors that carry the lifeblood of international trade? Because when a single incident shakes confidence in a critical maritime gateway, the consequences rarely remain limited to the sea. In the hours following the attack, analysts and security officials began examining the most critical question: who had both the capability and the strategic motivation to strike a major naval vessel in the Red Sea. Attention quickly turned toward the armed movement operating along the coast of Yemen, known as the Houthi forces. Over the past several years, this group has transformed from a regional militia into a force capable of conducting complex maritime attacks. They have developed a strategy that focuses on asymmetric warfare, where relatively inexpensive weapons are used to challenge far more advanced military systems. Instead of confronting powerful navies directly, they rely on speed, surprise, and unconventional tactics. Missiles launched from coastal areas, explosive drones approaching from multiple directions, remote-controlled boats filled with explosives. These tools allow smaller forces to threaten ships that cost billions of dollars to build. Military observers have noted that these methods are designed to overwhelm defensive systems by forcing them to react quickly to multiple threats at the same time. The Red Sea offers a geography that makes this strategy possible. Narrow waterways, heavy commercial traffic, and coastal launch points create conditions where ships can be targeted within a limited reaction window. In previous incidents, commercial vessels and oil tankers moving through nearby waters were also targeted using similar tactics. Each attack served two purposes. The first was direct disruption. The second was psychological pressure on global shipping networks. If shipping companies begin to believe that the route is unsafe, they may reroute vessels or delay shipments. That reaction alone can influence freight costs, energy prices, and insurance markets. For groups involved in regional conflicts, such economic pressure can become a strategic tool. The situation also reflects a broader pattern in modern conflict, where non-state actors attempt to influence global systems through targeted disruptions. Instead of controlling territory, they focus on choke points. Instead of large battles, they create strategic uncertainty. This approach transforms a single attack into a signal directed not only at military forces, but also at global commerce. For businesses watching from far away, the attack may appear to be a regional military incident, but for geopolitical analysts, it represents something more complex. It demonstrates how relatively small actors can interact with the structure of global trade. And when a warship becomes the target in one of the world's most sensitive maritime corridors, the question becomes larger than responsibility. The deeper concern becomes whether such tactics could reshape the security of international shipping routes. At first glance, a warship may appear to be simply a large piece of military equipment moving across the ocean. But in reality, a modern naval vessel represents one of the most complex and expensive technological systems ever placed at sea. The financial cost alone is enormous. A modern U.S. destroyer can require nearly $2 billion to design, build, and deploy. That number reflects only the physical structure of the ship itself. Inside the vessel exists a network of advanced systems that transform it into a floating command center, radar arrays scanning hundreds of miles of ocean and sky, missile defense systems capable of intercepting incoming threats, electronic warfare technology designed to detect and disrupt hostile signals, satellite communication links connecting the ship to global military networks. Each of these layers adds strategic value far beyond the steel hull visible above the waterline. The crew operating the ship represents another form of investment. Highly trained sailors, engineers, and defense specialists spend years preparing to manage these systems under extreme conditions. Training programs, maintenance cycles, and operational readiness add additional costs that are rarely visible to the public. When analysts calculate the true value of such a vessel, they do not only consider construction expenses, they consider the entire strategic ecosystem surrounding the ship. The technologies it carries, the intelligence networks it supports, the missions it performs in protecting international waterways. In many cases, a single naval vessel functions as a mobile shield for hundreds of commercial ships traveling through sensitive maritime routes. Its presence alone can deter attacks and provide reassurance to shipping companies moving billions of dollars worth of cargo across the ocean. When a vessel of this scale becomes the target of a successful attack, the impact extends beyond military calculations. It sends a signal to global observers that even the most advanced defense systems can face unexpected challenges. For financial markets and shipping industries, this signal carries meaning, because maritime security is one of the invisible foundations supporting international trade. When businesses ship products across oceans, they assume that major sea lanes remain stable and protected. Naval forces quietly maintain that stability. But when a billion-dollar vessel operating in a strategic corridor is damaged or destroyed, the perception of certainty begins to shift. The loss of a ship, therefore, represents more than the destruction of expensive equipment. It represents a moment where technology strategy and global economics intersect. And in that moment, analysts begin asking a deeper question. If such assets can be challenged in one of the most protected waterways on Earth, what does that imply for the future security of global trade routes? For most people, a naval attack at sea may appear distant and isolated, but for the global economy, such incidents rarely remain confined to the battlefield. When violence touches a critical shipping corridor, the first reactions often appear in places far away from the water. Shipping companies begin reviewing their risk calculations. Insurance firms analyze security conditions in the region. Commodity traders monitor transport costs and delivery timelines. Each of these reactions forms part of a larger chain that connects maritime security to global commerce. The Red Sea plays a central role in this chain. It functions as one of the main bridges between production centers in Asia and consumer markets in Europe. Thousands of cargo vessels move through this corridor every year, carrying electronics machinery, food supplies, and energy resources. The speed and efficiency of this route allow global supply chains to operate with precision. Factories depend on predictable delivery schedules. Retail markets rely on continuous product flow. Energy markets require stable transport routes. When an attack occurs in such a corridor, uncertainty immediately enters the system. Shipping companies begin asking whether vessels should continue using the route or temporarily change course. Rerouting a ship may appear simple, but the economic consequences can be significant. Longer journeys increase fuel consumption, delay cargo deliveries, and raise transportation costs. Insurance providers respond as well. When a maritime region is considered unstable, insurance premiums for vessels passing through that area often increase. Those additional costs are eventually passed along through the supply chain. Manufacturers pay more for imported materials. Retailers face higher logistics expenses. Consumers ultimately experience the financial impact through rising prices. Financial markets also watch these developments closely. Investors understand that trade corridors function as the arteries of the global economy. When an artery shows signs of disruption, market confidence can shift quickly. Energy traders examine oil shipment routes. Commodity markets evaluate potential delays in supply flows. Logistics companies review contingency plans. In this way, a single maritime attack can influence decisions made across multiple industries. The destruction of a warship in the Red Sea, therefore, represents more than a military event. It becomes a signal observed by governments, businesses, and financial institutions around the world. And as analysts examine the situation, one question begins to surface across boardrooms, trading floors, and policy discussions. If uncertainty continues to grow in such a critical maritime corridor, how prepared is the global economy to absorb the consequences? When a major naval incident occurs in a strategic maritime corridor, governments rarely remain passive. Such events activate a chain of military and diplomatic calculations designed to restore stability before uncertainty spreads further. Following the attack, security officials in several countries begin evaluating the situation through two parallel lenses. The first lens focuses on immediate security. The second examines long-term strategic balance in the region. Naval forces operating near the Red Sea often respond by increasing patrol activity across the corridor. Additional surveillance aircraft may begin monitoring shipping lanes. Warships from allied nations may reposition themselves closer to critical choke points, such as the el-Mandeb Strait. These movements serve a clear purpose. They signal that maritime routes will continue to be protected despite rising tensions. For commercial shipping companies, this visible presence can provide reassurance that naval protection remains active. However, military actions alone rarely solve the broader strategic problem. Diplomatic channels often become equally important in preventing further escalation. International organizations, regional governments, and defense alliances begin quiet discussions aimed at stabilizing the situation. These conversations may involve intelligence, sharing coordinated patrol operations, and diplomatic pressure designed to discourage further attacks. The objective is not only to respond to a single incident, it is to prevent the emergence of a pattern that could threaten the entire maritime corridor. History shows that trade routes remain stable only when multiple powers share an interest in maintaining security. If tensions escalate unchecked, the economic consequences can extend far beyond regional politics. Energy shipments could face delays. Insurance costs could continue rising. Shipping companies could begin adjusting routes away from the corridor. For this reason, governments treat incidents in strategic waterways with exceptional seriousness. Even when official statements appear calm behind the scenes, analysts and military planners work rapidly to evaluate potential scenarios. They examine intelligence reports, track vessel movements, and monitor communications across the region. Their goal is to understand whether the attack represents an isolated event or the beginning of a broader security challenge. This distinction matters greatly for the global economy. An isolated incident may create temporary concern. A sustained pattern of attacks could reshape how global shipping networks operate. For decision makers, the key task becomes restoring confidence in the safety of the corridor. Because without confidence, commercial vessels may hesitate to move through the waterway that connects some of the largest economies on Earth. And when confidence begins to weaken in a strategic maritime route, the ripple effects rarely remain limited to the sea. Modern supply chains depend on a fragile system of timing, coordination, and trust. Factories produce goods according to schedules designed months in advance. Cargo vessels move across oceans following carefully planned shipping lanes. Ports operate like synchronized gateways where thousands of containers move from ships to trucks and rail networks. When everything functions smoothly, the system appears invisible. Products arrive in markets on time. Energy flows toward industrial centers without interruption. Businesses rarely think about the long journey behind every shipment. But beneath this smooth surface lies a network of critical choke points. Narrow maritime corridors such as the Red Sea serve as gateways connecting entire continents. If movement slows or stops in one of these corridors, the disruption can travel rapidly through global supply networks. The attack on a warship in this region therefore raises a deeper concern, not only about military security, but about the stability of global logistics. Companies operating international supply chains understand how sensitive these routes can be. A delayed vessel can interrupt factory production schedules. A rerouted cargo shipment can increase transportation costs across multiple stages of delivery. Even small delays can accumulate into larger economic consequences when thousands of shipments depend on the same corridor. For shipping companies, the Red Sea route represents efficiency. For manufacturers, it represents reliability. For consumers, it represents consistent access to goods. When uncertainty enters the corridor, each of these layers begins to react. Logistics planners review alternative routes. Freight companies calculate the financial impact of longer journeys. Manufacturers evaluate whether inventory reserves are sufficient to absorb potential delays. These calculations occur quietly inside boardrooms and supply chain management systems around the world. Most consumers never notice these adjustments, yet they influence the availability and pricing of products in global markets. The vulnerability of modern supply chains lies in their precision. Efficiency has reduced the margin for unexpected disruption. Businesses often minimize inventory storage in order to reduce costs. Instead, they rely on constant movement of goods across oceans. This model works well when trade routes remain stable, but when a strategic corridor becomes uncertain, the balance begins to shift. The destruction of a warship therefore becomes more than a military signal. It becomes a reminder that the infrastructure supporting global trade depends heavily on secure maritime gateways. And when those gateways face new risks, supply chains that once seemed resilient may reveal hidden weaknesses. Events in distant waters often appear disconnected from everyday economic activity. A naval incident in the Red Sea may seem like a regional conflict far from financial centers and corporate offices. Yet the modern global economy is built upon invisible systems that depend heavily on stability. In places like these, sea lanes are among the most important of those systems. They function as the silent infrastructure carrying the majority of global trade. Energy resources, industrial materials, food supplies, and manufactured goods all move across oceans before reaching markets around the world. When these maritime routes remain secure, the system works with remarkable efficiency. Businesses plan production months in advance. Shipping companies coordinate global fleets with precise timing. Retail markets receive products without interruption. But stability in global trade is not automatic. It relies on constant protection, diplomacy, and strategic awareness. The attack on a major warship in the Red Sea highlights how quickly uncertainty can emerge in one of these critical gateways. For military planners, the incident raises questions about maritime security. For governments, it introduces concerns about regional stability. For the global business community, it reveals something equally important. The economic system depends on routes that pass through narrow and sometimes volatile regions. Entrepreneurs, investors, and corporate leaders often focus their attention on markets, technology, and financial indicators. Yet geopolitical events occurring far from stock exchanges can influence the structure of global commerce. When a shipping corridor becomes unstable, logistics costs can rise. Energy markets may experience sudden pressure. Trade patterns can begin to shift as companies search for alternative routes. These adjustments may start quietly, but their influence can spread across industries. Understanding this connection is essential for those who study long-term economic trends. The world economy operates through networks. Trade routes, financial systems, supply chains, and security frameworks are all linked together. When one part of the system experiences stress, the effects rarely remain isolated. They move through the network, influencing decisions made by governments, corporations, and investors. The destruction of a warship in the Red Sea therefore represents more than a single military event. It becomes a reminder of the delicate balance that supports global trade. A balance maintained not only through economic cooperation, but also through the protection of the corridors that connect nations. For those watching global developments carefully, the lesson is clear. The stability of international commerce depends not only on markets and technology, but also on the security of the oceans that carry the lifeblood of the modern world.